Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Analysis. I'm your host, Patel. Now, the roots of the conflict in Gaza and wider Palestine can be traced back to the birth of Zionism in 1897 when Theodor Herzl convened the first Zionist Congress in Switzerland, advocating for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Fast forward to 1917 and the Balfour Declaration, which was issued by the British government expressing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Then, in 1948, Israel declared its independence, which was recognized by the United Nations, leading to the Nakba, or the catastrophe for Palestinians, where over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes. Then the Six-Day War in 1967 saw Israel capturing the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights, significantly altering the region's geopolitical landscape. And remember, they also captured the Sinai Peninsula. Now, after two intifadas in the 1980s and in the noughties as well, Israeli forces unilaterally withdrew from Gaza, dismantling settlements and their military presence, yet maintaining control over its borders, over its sea, and over its air. And this happened in 2005. In 2017, the United States formally recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, a move that sparked international controversy and protest. And then on the 7th of October 2023, Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, resulting in significant casualties and escalating the conflict to unprecedented levels. The attack on the 7th of October saw Hamas fighters breaching Israeli defences, and it led to over 1,200 deaths and numerous hostages that were taken into Gaza. This marked the deadliest day in Israel's history, and in response, they launched extensive airstrikes and ground operations on Gaza, and the rhetoric from Israeli officials has been described as genocidal by many international observers. Now, on the 8th of October, Hezbollah joined the conflict in limited ways, opening a new front in the north, further intensifying the violence. The conflict widened as the Houthis launched their first attack on Israel, signalling a broader regional involvement. Now, the United Nations has repeatedly called for an end to hostilities and a return to peace negotiations, but America and Britain have stood firm and in their ironclad support for Israel's genocidal war. And meanwhile, the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court are still investigating potential war crimes committed by Israel during the conflict. So what started off as a war in Gaza has now turned into a regional war, with Israel attacking Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and Iran. Before bringing in our political analysts, check out this report on another front of Israel's war, the West Bank.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres issued a stark warning during a recent press briefing, stating that the war in the occupied West Bank is boiling over. His comments come amid escalating tensions as Israel intensifies its offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon, while the ongoing war in Gaza further complicates the regional landscape. Guterres highlighted the alarming nature of the situation, emphasizing that attacks in Lebanon are threatening the entire region. The UN chief called for immediate action to de-escalate the violence and urged all parties involved to prioritize dialogue over aggression. The ongoing war has already resulted in significant humanitarian crises, and Guterres warned that the escalation could lead to a broader war that may destabilize the entire Middle East. He reiterated the UN's commitment to supporting peace efforts and addressing the root causes of the violence. As the situation continues to develop, the international community remains watchful, urging restraint and cooperation among nations to prevent further deterioration of peace in the region.
The situation in the occupied West Bank is boiling over. And now in Lebanon, attacks including on civilians are threatening the entire region. Following the horrific terror attacks perpetrated by Hamas on 7 October, Gaza has become ground zero to a level of human suffering that is hard to fathom. In the midst of all the upheaval, UNRWA, more than ever, is indispensable. UNRWA, more than ever, is irreplaceable. That is why I've written directly to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to express profound concern about draft legislation that could prevent UNRWA from continuing its essential work in the occupied Palestinian territory. What should be the first step? We are asking for a ceasefire both in Gaza and in Lebanon.
So, joining us is Nasim Ahmed, a political analyst at the Middle East Monitor, who has been covering the Middle East for the last 15 years. Nasim, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start off with Israel's, well, the very first idea of Israel. And it seems to be, since the days of Theodor Herzl, it's been fighting for its existence, and it's locked into what many observers say are forever wars. What's your view on that?
I think the history tour you provided was excellent. And there's a thread that goes right through it, a consistent thread, which is that Israel never misses an opportunity to expand its borders and ethnically cleanse Palestinians. Every state is a creature of opportunity, and Israel's the same. Every state pursues its interest and its goals. But Israel's goals are slightly different in that it requires Jewish domination in a land where Jews were only 10% of the population when the infamous Balfour Declaration of 1917 was issued. So the opportunity Israel seeks and has been seeking since its founding is to maximize its territorial control of Palestine and dominate the indigenous population. That has been the goal of Zionism, and that has been the goal of the state that was founded on the ideology of Zionism beginning in 1948. And I think we have to see Gaza in that light. And Gaza last year was, for the Israelis, an ideal opportunity. As I said, Israel is a creature of opportunity, an ideal opportunity to deal with what it calls its Gaza problem. Our viewers will know Israel, in a number of wars over the past 2 decades, have tried to what they call mow the lawn in Gaza, which is to kill and maim Palestinians and prevent them from ever becoming stable and strong and be able to resist the Palestinian Israeli occupation. So they saw an opportunity, and they took that opportunity. And the opportunity was to ethnically cleanse Gaza, as they did with the Palestinians in 1948, or commit genocide. And the third option was to make Gaza at least uninhabitable.
Sure.
The first option was not really on the table because Egypt rejected that offer. What we see is, of course, a genocide unfolding. But the ultimate goal here is Israel is seeking to exploit the opportunity of self-defense, as it claims, to ultimately do what it's been doing for the past 80 years, which is to expel as many Palestinians as possible from the territory, because it covers ultimately all of Israel and Palestine.
I want to interject in there because I need to ask you a few questions. My first question to that would be, Israel and its defenders will say that this is a United Nations recognized state. It was born out of the United Nations in 1948, where the General Assembly accepted Israel into the community of nations. And therefore, they feel extremely threatened by its neighbors having to defend itself over so many years. And now lately, Iran, perhaps a threshold nuclear power, with Hezbollah on its northern border, a militant group that has all these missiles that they keep throwing into Israel, and also in their terms, a terrorist organization called Hamas in the Gaza Strip that committed all these atrocities. Can you see from their perspective that their reaction is because they're in a very, very unstable and unsafe neighborhood, and hence they need to react. I'm not making any justifications. I just want you to comment on what on their viewpoint.
And that is quite a common talking point from Israel and Israel's friends in the West.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I mean, even if we take for granted that the UN had the right to divide Palestine, UN, first of all, does not have any such right to divide territory into separate countries. UN does not possess that power. UN does not possess that responsibility. Anyhow, even if the UN did that, UN also recognized Palestine. There is a Palestinian state under the United Nations, under the UN resolution of 1947, partition plan. Palestine was recognized under the British mandate as a territory, meaning Palestine was ready to become a state. But what the British did was include the Balfour Declaration as part of that mandate, which is to create a Jewish home. That's the root of the problem.
Yeah.
But even if we take that the argument that Israel is a recognized state, it is, and the UN founded Israel through its resolution. Israel accepted that resolution, the partition plan. But as I said, Palestine is also recognized. Most of the countries, 150 or so countries in the world, recognize a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
Under international law, the very authority which these people would cite and say that Israel has a right to self-defense, Israel has been recognized by the UN, the same bodies will say Israel is an occupying power. Israel is illegally occupying the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And that was one of the latest determination made by the ICJ just 3 months ago during summer in July, I think, where it said that after many months of deliberations, it concluded that Israel is illegally occupying the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
Nasim, we know that, and it's very likely that there could be arrest warrants issued for Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. But what my point is, when you have the Israeli narrative, which is effectively what the Americans and the other allies of Israel will say, that this is now a Jewish home. Jews around the world are intrinsically linked to Israel, even though by the IHRA definition you're not meant to do that, but they do that they do that quite openly. What's your what sense of where is that the gap between that perspective and the perspective of many of those in the Arab and Muslim world who simply do not recognize Israel's right to exist? Does it have a right to exist? And should that right be recognized as a starting point from the perspective of Muslim and Arabs before they can meet the moral high ground and then tackle the root cause, as you said, which is the creation of Israel on so much Palestinian land?
Well, let's, for the sake of argument, accept Israel's right to exist. Then Israel has to say, what is the border of Israel? What is Israel? Where does the boundaries of Israel end? We don't know what the boundaries of Israel is. And Israel has never made any reference to say that, our boundaries end in the 1967 Green Line. That's not what Israel said. Israel still remains, as a result, a colonial project. And that project is the mission of the current government and many governments in Israel before. They want what we all know is Greater Israel, which is all of historic Palestine. And the people that make that argument essentially say that Israel is defending against Palestinian terrorism. Yeah. But under international law, as you know and everyone knows, the occupied people has a right to self-defense. And it's one of the key arguments that were made in the ICJ, in the two ICJ cases over the past 7 months. And the crux of the argument is that an occupying power cannot claim the right to self-defense against people resisting occupation. That's the fundamental crux of things. So when Israel says it's defending itself against Palestinian terrorism, it cannot claim self-defense against Palestinians who are resisting illegitimate violence.
With respect, Nasim, you've not answered my question. Do those, the Muslims and the Arab world, do they need to recognize Israel's right to exist? Is that a key stumbling point in terms of bringing peace to the table? I'm just putting something out there.
Yeah, so no, I get what you're saying, and I would put to the people who pose that argument, the Arab world have presented Israel full normalization in 2002 in what is called the Arab Peace Initiative that was by the previous King Abdullah in 2002, and Israel flatly rejected that offer. Why? Because ultimately, as I said, Israel remains a colonial project. Israel wants greater Israel, which is all of historic Palestine. If Israel wanted peace and normalization with its Arab neighbors, imagine that 2002, they could have had that. They could have had full normalization with the Arab countries, with Saudi Arabia, which they are seeking now in the so-called Abraham Accords, with Syria, with Lebanon. Every single Arab country was willing to recognize Israel, offer normalization in exchange for an ending of the occupation and granting Palestinian the right to self-determination. So that's there. That's been on the table for more than 20 years
so
now.
What years?
Why the question I would say, why hasn't Israel accepted that?
So are you trying to say Israel has not accepted that because it just wants to continuously expand its boundaries? I mean, you've got a point. I mean, just this morning there was a report where Bezalel Smotrich, the far-right fascist minister in the Israeli government, said that his idea of a greater Israel incorporates part of the whole of Jordan, parts of Syria, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, and including Egypt, right over the Nile, over the Suez Canal and the Nile as well. So you do have a point there, but obviously that's an extreme view. Not a
No, we shouldn't say
mainstream
it's an
view.
extreme view. Smotrich is part of the current government. These are ministers within the cabinet.
Yeah.
The UK has extreme ministers, you could say, MPs, members of parliament, but they're not in government. They don't form the government and advocate for ethnic cleansing, advocate for the expansion of the boundaries of the UK and colonize other countries.
Sure.
What Smotrich is doing, who is the finance minister, and Ben Gvir, who who's heralds from a terrorist group within Israel who has been convicted for terrorism. He is now a member of the government, and he's a minister within Israel. So these guys are calling the shots in Israel. So we can't simply say, okay, this is a fringe minority opinion. It's actually not a fringe opinion.
Okay,
it's actually a mainstream opinion within Israel.
Let's move on to the solutions. I mean, a lot of people talk about one-state solution, but one thing I found quite remarkable is that we actually have a one-state reality right now, because historic Palestine and the Golan Heights, which isn't part of historic Palestine, but Israel has obviously occupied, historic Palestine is now ruled from the river to the sea, as the saying goes, by Israel. There are 3 different types of rule that's going on. Some even say 4, 5 types of different rule going on for different communities of Arabs that live in and amongst the Jewish, perhaps not even the majority now. It's probably on a par. Now, if Israel wants to expand, and let's say that's its borders and it counts itself as being part of the borders, isn't the victory for the Palestinians the fact that they remain on that land? And as long as they remain on that land, Israel cannot, in essence, get the peace and security that it wants.
I think that's an important point. Ben Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, he's famously quoted as saying the Palestinians will die and they will forget. The Palestinians didn't die and they didn't forget. They remain on their land. And that's the ultimate form of resistance. And they haven't forgotten the fact that they are a nation. They have rights under international law recognized by the UN, recognized by the community of the international community. And they're still there. And they, in terms of numbers, they are in historic Palestine is 50-50. There are just as many Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and Israel as there are Jews. And globally, there are more Palestinians than there are Jews. Let's not forget that there are 6 million Palestinians who are refugees. So from that point of view, that that's a success, and every single Palestinian yearns to return to their land. They insist on the right to return, a right which is recognized under international law. So so in terms of going forward, one state, I think we've tried nearly a century of trying to divide what is a one territory, Palestine. Trying to divide Palestine into a Jewish country or a Palestinian country or a Muslim country or a Christian country, it's just this kind of balkanization of Palestine it's not something that was possible before, and we have seen after a century now it can only lead to violence. So I think trying to separate Palestine, divide Palestine into ethnic communities is not workable.
Okay, Nasim, so I understand. It's not, I think what you're trying to allude to is that there should be a country which has equal rights for all. Let's move on to the American elections, because there's a lot of debate going on at the moment, especially in terms of what the reaction of a large constituents of Muslim, Arab, and also young voters who are appalled at the actions of Joe Biden. Some call him Genocide Joe, and they say they simply cannot support the Democrats. However, very lately there have been some Muslim organizations who are now saying that it's better to vote for Kamala Harris than to vote for someone like or allow someone like Donald Trump to get in. What's your view on that? Because there's been a lot of strong opinion going on both sides.
The US position since 7 October has been, even to me, has been shocking because basically it's acted as a PR agency for the past year for Israel.
But tell me what,
I think with the Muslims, I'm not going to really pontificate on people who are voting. It's a very, very difficult situation. On the one hand, you have an administration who have given ironclad support.
You say you're not going to take a view, but are you minded to say that there should be something that the Democrats get in terms of damage to their core vote because of what they did in allowing Netanyahu to commit the crimes as are being alleged by many human rights groups across the world, and obviously the ICC and the ICJ.
Yeah, I can see the argument clearly. I can see why that it makes perfect sense to punish the Democrats for offering ironclad support. I think if they did not give cover to the Israelis to commit the genocide, it would not have been possible. So I can perfectly understand that. But I also understand that having Trump will do even more. Trump will give Israel a carte blanche. Yes, the argument is that he's a rogue entity. You can't really rely on him. So he may do something crazy, even against the Israelis, even against Netanyahu. I doubt that. So my instinct is to really say that I think Trump will be worse. Trump will allow this war to continue. Not to say the Democrats aren't doing that. Trump will make lives of Muslims even worse. So that's my instinct. But I can understand why people would not want to vote for the current administration, and I would not impose on them to say, look, you need to vote for them instead of Trump, because it's a very difficult choice to make.
Nasim, thank you so much for being here with us today and answering my questions with such diligence. Obviously, we've been covering a lot of issues there. Look, folks, that's all for Analysis today. I've been your host, Mas Patel. Join us again. Thank you.